Commissioner Clark. Present. With 6 out of 7 members of the community, Commissioner Public Safety and Accountability present, we have a forum, and we can conduct the public business, the commission business. Next item of business, is public comment. If you would like to share something related to the commission work on public safety and accountability, you have a few options. You can speak at a public meeting. Tonight, as in our previous meeting, we encourage the public to share comments with particular attention paid to Chicago Police Department budget priorities for the upcoming year. You can also submit public comment in writing by emailing your comments to the community commission public comment at citychicago.org. You can also bring a copy of the comments to the public meeting and give it to someone on the commission or someone on the commission staff. People who wanted to speak during public comment period tonight were asked to make their names in writing earlier tonight. Names again drawn and run by a member of the commission staff. Speakers will be called in the order with their names drawn. If your name is called off the public comment, we ask you to approach the microphone and line up in the order in which your name is called. When it's your turn to speak, please say your name, and then spell your name, and then offer your comment. Each speaker will have 2 minutes. We have allotted a total of 20 minutes for the time.
One's virtual, one's in person here. Let's do in person or.
First, yeah. Do we have a mic for public comment?
This one.
First public commenter, George Devereaux.
Hey, good evening. My name is George Devereaux, and I'm a lifelong resident of Chicago. Self-help speaker this evening to express my outrage with the announcement that was made at the last CCPSA meeting held September 28th. It was announced that board members nominated Mr. Orion to fill one of the police board vacancies. I would like to provide some exposing his poor choice for this nomination. Mr. James was appointed to the Illinois Prisoner Review Board by Governor Pritzker here in 2019. Rather than proceeding forward with this reconfirmation of 2022, Mr. James forwarded a letter of resignation to Governor Pritzker. And why? This was due to the fact that we're not been able to receive enough votes to be retained. The radical restorative justice and the early prisoner relief philosophies were not shared by the intention voting members of the Illinois Prisoner Review Board. One such glaring and disgusting example is that Mr. James voted the early release of double murderer Johnny Beal in 2021. Johnny Beal was convicted and was juvenile sentenced for the July 17, 1970 ambush slaughter of uniformed Chicago police officers, Sergeant James Severin and Officer Anthony Buzzato, who were working in the CHA Green Housing Development. Mr. James was successful with his 2021 vote, and police murderer Johnny Beal was granted early parole release. This action alone should be enough disqualifying to serve as an unbiased Chicago Police Board member. You all made a grievous mistake by submitting Mr. James as one of your nominees to fill one of the police board vacancies. Mr. James has obviously demonstrated unwise judgment and was a disastrous nominee choice. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak with you.
Thank you for your comment. Our next speaker, one of the leading virtual, was David White.
Can you bring David White up?
Okay, now can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, it's David White, DAVID WHITE, and I want to talk about the police budget. there can be little doubt that our police department is using its massive budget ineffectively. We see an ever-increasing budget for a police department that is slow to respond, doesn't solve most crimes, and is often dismissive and rude to the people who pay the taxes to support them. It's like an employer giving an employee a poor performance review and then turning around and giving them a raise. It's time to reconsider the police budget, focusing on reducing rather than increasing it. This will allow the saved funds to be channeled into other initiatives that are more likely to enhance public safety through nonviolent interventions. Increasing financial support for programs like Treatment Not Trauma and investing in education and employment opportunities on Chicago's south and west sides will undoubtedly yield more significant improvements to public safety compared to funneling another $2 billion into a police department that doesn't have a specific plan for reducing crime and can't justify why it's currently allocating its funds the way it is. Historically, increasing the police budget has not correlated with decreased crime. It's time to start looking at public safety more holistically and investing our money more wisely. Let's decrease the police budget so we can invest in the safety of the people rather than in simply ensuring job security in a police force that is both ineffective and unaccountable. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Are there any more public speakers? We've reached the end of our public comment period. Thank you again to all our speakers who valued your input. The next order of business is approval of the minutes. Before today's meeting, draft minutes of the commission meeting held on August 31st, September 7th, and the closed meeting held on September 18th were shared with all commissioners. Are there any corrections to the draft minutes that have been circulated? There are no corrections. I move to approve the meeting minutes in the meeting held at the aforementioned date. I move to approve the commission meeting minutes. Commissioner Gomez is seconded. Is there any debate on the voting issue? Hearing none, we'll now move to a vote. All in favor of approving the minutes of the commission, August 31st, September 7th, and the September 18th meeting, please signify by saying aye. Are there any nays? The ayes have it, and the minute meetings are approved. Our next order of business will be the approval of a series of closed meetings related to the appointment. Over the next several months, the commission will be engaged in the process of selecting candidates for publicly held positions as dictated by the ordinance establishing the commission. Section 2C3 of the Illinois Open Meetings Act allows the commission to meet in closed session to consider the following subjects: the selection of a person to fill a public office as defined in this act, including a vacancy in a public office, when the public body is given the power to appoint under law or ordinance for the discipline, performance, or removal of the occupant of a public office, when the public body is given the power to remove the occupant under law or ordinance. Section 2A of the act authorizes the commission to take a vote to hold a series of closed meetings over the course of not more than 3 months from today, and only for the purposes cited in this section. I now move to hold a series of closed meetings to take place for the maximum period allowable as authorized by section 2C of the Open Meetings Act. I have moved to hold a series of closed meetings to take place for the maximum period allowable, and Commissioner Gomez has seconded. Is there any debate on the motion? Hearing none, we will now move to a vote. Those in favor of voting a series of closed meetings to take place as authorized by the Open Meetings Act, please signify by saying aye. Are there any nays? The ayes have it, and the closed meetings are approved. The next order of business is a motion to recommend the Office of Inspector General investigate officer involvement with extremist or hate-based orders. For that, I will pass it to Commissioner Williams.
Good evening, everybody. A recent Sun-Times article report indicated that officers in the Chicago Police Department have been identified as members of extremist groups and thus far have faced no discipline or been fired for these associations. The Community Commission does not and will not weigh in on allegations related to individual officers. If the reporting is accurate, that conduct in our estimation is unacceptable. Superintendent Snelling has publicly responded to these news reports and has articulated his agreement with the seriousness of this issue. He also made a commitment during his testimony at the budget hearings that he would have BIA investigate the allegations that were raised against the 9 police officers immediately. And we commend him for his attention to this issue. However, we believe that all Chicago residents deserve to feel safe. And safety means that those who wear the uniform and choose to protect and serve are also associating with groups that espouse hate, prejudice, and terrorism. This issue has been a priority for the Community Commission all year. Almost monthly, we have discussed the work that we have been doing with CPD to bring a new level of clarity to the police department's policy prohibiting these very types of associations. Commissioner Terry and I have been working with CPD since January on an order that prohibits officers from associating with criminal or bias-based organizations. The new policy should give the police department a stronger and more effective tool to hire police officers who associate with extremist or hate-based groups. We anticipate that the stronger policy will be up for a vote at our next meeting. But CPD currently has rules on the books that could be used to address systemic issues related to hate group associations that the article spotlighted. The new stronger rules will make a difference if CPD uses the tools it has to drive out extremism and bias. It's critically important that the police department use whatever tools it has as powerfully and effectively as possible. The Commission has the power to recommend that the Public Safety Inspector General conduct research or audits. The Public Safety Inspector General can help us to understand why the current system isn't working and what will need to be done to make sure that the new policy is much more effective. Before I make my motion, I just want to be clear that in the course of our work with the Chicago Police Department on strengthening the policy, we had a very collaborative and meeting strong effort. Our policy is available for review on our website. At this point, in light of the importance of this issue and our concern that the community feels that this is being appropriately investigated and fairly investigated, pursuant to NCC 280-050F, I am making a motion for the Community Commission to exercise their power to recommend that the Public Safety Inspector General conduct an audit of CPD's processes and practices for identifying and disciplining officers who associate with extremist or bias-based organizations, assess whether those processes and practices have been effective, and recommend what actions must be taken to ensure that police officers who associate with extremist or bias-based organizations are removed from the Chicago Police Department. Second.
Commissioner Williams has moved, and Commissioner Perry has seconded the motion to recommend that the Public Safety Inspector General conduct an audit of the process and practice for identifying and disciplining officers who associate with extremist or bias organizations, assess whether those processes and practices are effective, and recommend what actions must be taken to ensure that police officers who associate with extremist or bias organizations are removed from the Chicago Police Department. Is there any debate on the motion? There is. I have a question, more so a question that I already know the answer to, but I think it's a public for important. Because I've been asked this question a lot recently. Why the Inspector General?
So the reason why I make a motion to include the Inspector General and ask that entity to do this investigation is because, first of all, they have the authority to do it, and we confirm that with the Inspector General to make sure that not only with her entity have the authority to do it, but they would also have the bandwidth to do it in an expedient fashion, and we were assured that that was, something that they could do. So from a practical perspective, we asked the IG because they seem to be the best option for that. I do want to be clear that BIA certainly has the authority to conduct this investigation, and as I previously indicated, Superintendent Snelling was extremely vocal in his testimony before the city council that he intended to mobilize BIA to conduct that investigation immediately. And that he was making a commitment that if that investigation demonstrated association with these bias-based groups, that there would be consequences for those police officers. And I appreciate that, and I commend him for doing that and being right on top of it. I want to be clear that this recommendation that this be referred to the IG is not based on a belief that CPD can't do the investigation, that they won't do it properly, or that Superintendent Snelling won't somehow ensure that it's done properly. In fact, I have all the confidence in the world that he would. However, I do think that in light of Chicago's history, particularly with these kinds of bias-based groups, that is painfully detailed in the Sun Times reporting, that community members deserve the comfort of knowing that this investigation was done by a neutral party, and that this investigation will not only look at those non-specific officers, but it will look at this type of misconduct systemically throughout the Chicago Police Department, if that exists. And it will be a broader based investigation that isn't laser focused on just 9 individuals, but is more focused on making sure that this kind of conduct is rooted out. And ultimately the goal is that both community members and police officers, because we hear from police officers all the time that they don't want biased police officers in their ranks either. And so my goal in making this recommendation was to ensure that all members of our community can feel confident that the Inspector General has done a thorough investigation by a neutral party intending to root out this type of conduct. And so with that, my hope is that we can all move on with confidence that the police officers who are in our communities are police officers that want to serve and protect everybody.
And, there's nothing precluding, can BIA and the UID run concurrent investigation with the simultaneously?
I don't think there's anything that precludes that, at least not in class with my knowledge. And I do think that my understanding of how BIA would normally conduct an investigation, their investigation would be laser focused on these non-individual officers that have been specifically named. The IG has the authority to view this from a broader lens. And so that was a motivating factor for including them and requesting that they conduct an investigation into this issue.
And my last question would be, I've gotten this question a lot, so again, I'd be willing to answer this, but if you, today specifically, I've gotten this question a few times, from members of the press as well as community members. Can you talk a little bit about the origin of how our community commission even got involved with this policy, like where did that start for us?
Yes. Before, so the Community Commission for Public Safety got involved with working on this policy because of the CPD, it's a modification of a current CPD general order. And so pursuant to our ordinance, we do have authority over general orders. And so we're not only have spent a lot of time with CPD over the last several months, trying to modify the current order, which is in place, it really was focused solely on street games, as opposed to bias-based organizations. Through a lot of collaboration that sounded incredibly positive, and a lot of feedback from CPD, and then feedback back to them from Ramel and I through our conversations with all of you and our staff. we have been able to get a draft policy together that encompasses a wide range of, bias-based conduct. It still includes, street gang, organized crime related conduct as well. And one of the things that I think is really important to emphasize about the policy that we have been working on is that the policy, because it is a general order, it sets forth very specific types of conduct that are now impermissible. In the past, if you all recall, there was a lot of consternation about a list of groups that would not be appropriate for police officers to participate in. The current version of this general order takes the emphasis off that list and focuses on specific conduct that would encompass the conduct that we are concerned about. So I think that given the fact that this is a general order, given the fact that we have authority over it through the ordinance, but also given that there was a board willingness on the part of the Chicago Police Department to get our feedback and to work with us collaboratively to ensure that we got this very important general order ready. We really moved along in that direction and was indicated in the opening comments. We anticipate that we'll be voting on that modified general order.
Thank you. Any other comments? So before we go, is there any commissioners who would like to speak, so we can get a cue going? Commissioner Brown.
I want to preface my question by saying that I was at the community hearing several months ago where this issue came before the committee, and BIA was present to answer questions from various older people. And many people beyond the committee were there. Yeah, it's changed names. So what was it? Public safety? Yeah, it used to be the Committee for Public Safety. Right now it's Citizen Fire. So at that committee hearing, BIA was present and older people, it was a packed room and older people were asking all kinds of questions. And I think the majority of people probably walked out of the room that day being quite concerned about BIA and the way that BIA answered many questions. So my question is about whether or not the IG has authority to also, as a part of the review BIA's investigations into the people who they investigated already, because they had said they had already done investigations and didn't find any evidence of associations. And then, they were also asked, well, what about the 9 people that NPR named? And they said, we haven't been given their names, which, wasn't a great answer, obviously. So does the IG have any way to be able to look into the investigation so that at least one person was already investigated for a known association, an alleged known association? Can the IG review that investigation to see what BIA actually did in that investigation?
So I think I understand your question. If I'm not answering it right, let me know. But just to back up a little bit, our concern about the association policy really was born out of an investigation that was conducted that resulted in discipline that I think we and the community and the Inspector General in particular felt was inappropriate because the police officer involved was not hired. The Inspector General at that time conducted an audit of that investigation, which led to her ultimate conclusions that there was sufficient information as part of that investigation to support more significant discipline than the discipline that officer happened to receive. So I think specifically with respect to that investigation, I think the Inspector General has already looked at it and has already stated her opinions on that, and that is us become very interested in this topic. In terms of her ability to, sort of investigate CIA for the quality of their previous investigation, the IB has an opportunity to audit investigations as part of their, the normal course of their work. They do it for COA, they do it for CIA, that's part of their work. I can't really speak to how detailed that work is or the process by which they go about doing it, but I'm just not familiar with their day-to-day process in that way, so I think that would have to be a question for them. However, as we said before, one of the reasons that we are requesting that the IG look into this is so that the IG can come at it, not necessarily with a laser focus on these officers whose names were listed, but from a holistic approach, to examine whether there are, frankly, whether there's more of this that we just don't know about. That could potentially encompass officers that may have been previously investigated. I think that's an answer that we're only gonna know once, that investigation takes place, because as information unfolds in that investigation, I think it will dictate whether or not the IG, what, who, and how the IG is pursuing this issue. But in sum, I would just say that the questions that you have just posed to me were questions that I certainly had, and that were now shared. And so that is those types of questions were the reasons that prompted us to, make the motion that was just made to this be, something that actually has an opportunity to do.
Any other comments or questions about the motion that is currently on the floor? Hearing no further debate, those in favor will move to a vote. Those in favor of adopting the motion, please signify by saying aye. Are there any nays? The ayes have it and the motion carries. And the commission will draft a formal request to no presentation. Next order of business is report of updates. And we will begin with discussing the association's order of trial after the Commissioner Perry.
Thank you. So as we just mentioned, the commission has been working with CPD since January on an update to the association's order, a policy prohibiting police officers from associating with criminal organizations. We are now in the community feedback process for the association's order. And so this policy has been updated to also prohibit officers from associating with violence, terrorist, or hate organizations, or engaging in behaviors that support these organizations. So on Monday, October 30th at noon, we will be hosting a webinar, an information webinar, so that you can learn more about this policy. The QR code is up behind me, so you can pull out your phones to scan, or if you have access to our website, it is also posted on our website. We will be also accepting community feedback online, so even if you are not in person, you can also provide feedback online. And our goal, as already mentioned, is to vote on the final order at the November 13th meeting.
Thank you for that update, Commissioner Perry. Our next order of business is the discussion on the side of the department budget. Now, I'll pass it to Vice President Jordan.
Hi everyone, thank you all for being here. I hope you're staying engaged and excited. So as you all might know, one of the commission's powers and duties, according to the notice of code 28005, subsection O, states that every year the commission must review the police department budget. And we have to do this before the city council votes on the budget. The commission can make comments and recommendations, including changes that we would like to see when it comes to the police department budget. President Driver and I have been meeting with the Chicago Police Department, with subject matter experts, including some policing professionals and police officers, and even with community members to learn about their perspectives on these city budget priorities. We also held a webinar this past Monday, and this is community feedback about the budget and the budget priorities. We've also heard comments from district councils and community meetings about the budget. We heard your comments at the beginning of this meeting as well. Now, commissioners and the public still have the opportunity to provide feedback on this city budget. For the members of the public, you can contact us with your priorities at community commission public comment at cityofchicago.org. You can give us your thoughts about the budget or even thoughts about other things. Now, for commissioners, it's going to be my job and Commissioner Driver's job to take in your questions, your comments, and your suggestions. As we move forward, we continue to provide input on what the budget priorities and recommendations that we make are going to be. Now, in order to make that process easier for everyone here in the commission and for the public, we have invited and are joined by two members of the Chicago Police Department, Mr. Ryan Simmons and Commander Van. They're going to give us a briefing, and they're going to answer questions related to the budget and priorities of the Ryan and Commander Van, you may approach. I think Ryan's going to present on the podium. Commander Van, if you want to sit down while we get the questions, we can ask Commander Van specific questions about the department and its operations. Whatever you're ready, Ryan, you can go.
Okay.
All right. So good evening, everyone. My name is Ryan Fitzsimons. I'm a deputy director within the office of the superintendent. And I work primarily on the budget, trying to liaise with OBM, EHR, PSA, all of those other city departments, which we work with to craft this budget. So you're about to see kind of the 2024 budget recommendations that we're submitting. So the goal of this was to create a transformational budget that matches the needs of the department while remaining budget neutral. Some of the benefits of what we're proposing will allow in savings in personnel, which can be reinvested in modernizing the department. And we're also going to acquire civilian skill sets similar to other major police departments. So for example, LAPD are north of 30% civilian, NYPD is north of 30% civilian, LAPD is north of 20% civilian, Houston, DC, Philly, all north of 10% civilian. Here in Chicago, we're between 6 and 7% civilian. So this will kind of bring us into best practices with other cities. And most importantly, this budget will also help us speed up our consent decree dramatically by pursuing training and supervision. So we have 5 initiatives that we're proposing. These initiatives are enhancing investigations, expanding victim and community services, increasing supervision and training, department transformation through modernization, and strengthening administrative processes. So the enhancing investigations section, a lot of this came from reading the mayor's transition report, where he's seeking to add 200 detectives next year or during his term. So we've already promoted 70. We have enough that we can probably do another class of 30 at some point in the near future. And then this is going to add 100 additional detectives to help us address homicides, to help us address robberies, to help us address vehicular hijackings. In addition to this, we're going to be adding 30 evidence technicians to help us better collect evidence for crime scenes where we have a high number of pieces of evidence, shell casings that we need to recover. And we're also going to be adding 42 civilian opportunities. So a lot of these are going to focus on our forensics unit and also some analysts, which will help us better identify crime trends that we see popping up. Our second initiative here is expanding victim and community services. So this was something when we engaged with the public during the mayor's roundtables in the run-up to budget. There was a lot of talk about how best to provide more victim services. So in response to that, we are making sure that each and every district, each of our 22 districts has both a crime victim advocate, which right now provides support to victims of non-fatal shootings. And we're also going to make sure that each and every district has a domestic violence advocate. These will be 2 civilian federal codes, which we're looking to expand citywide. In addition to this, we're adding program directors who will be the middle management to ensure that those people who will fill those advocate roles are appropriately supervised. We're also going to make sure that each and every one of our tier 1 and tier 2 districts, which are some of our most busy districts that have the highest rates of crime, we're adding more civilian personnel to try and build that connection between the community and the police to build that sense of order and that we can help solve some problems. Our third is supervision and training, and this gets to the heart of the consent decree. Right now, we're at about 80% compliance on primary compliance with the consent decree. So there are 3 levels of compliance in the consent decree. Primary compliance, which is primarily just writing the policy. Secondary compliance, which is training the entire department on the policy. And operational compliance. Are your people doing what the policy says and what they were trained to do? Right now, for that first level, we're at 80%. Operationally, we're at 6%. But to go further, we need to train the entire department. And we want to train the entire department without taking officers off the beat. So what this budget will do is it'll allow us to add 100 civilian training officers to make sure that we are moving from primary compliance to secondary compliance. Additionally, we're taking 170 field training officers to ensure that as we get new recruits coming out of the academy, we're going to have 1 field training officer for each probationary police officer. So that'll make sure they're having that one-on-one attention that will ensure that they're getting all of the best training necessary to police constitutionally. And as far as supervision, one of the major things that we need to make sure is that our officers on the street have a consistent supervisor that understands them both as human beings, but also as a manager, and is able to provide support and guidance to them. What this will do is this budget will add 100 sergeants to better support our officers and also ensure accountability for field operation. Next, we have department transformation through modernization. So if in reading one of the consent decree reports, one of the things that they asked us to do was to create a DEI team. This will create the department's first diversity, equity, and inclusion team led by an assistant director, 1 senior equity officer, and 2 regular equity officers. We're also adding more personnel in research and development to ensure that we are engaging with cutting edge policy and also bringing that to the public for additional feedback. We're also expanding on our data unit, bringing in from last budget to this budget an additional 6 data scientists will help provide that specialized analysis, which will help us better engage with the data that we have. Right now, we're very data rich, we're analysis poor, but we're going to be able to manage our data so much better to manage the Chicago Police Department more efficiently. And we're going to add more officers or retired officers to our TRED unit, which reviews all uses of force to help provide more training opportunities for officers. So we're going to expand that unit too. So we'll have about 39 officers reviewing use of force, in addition to what is already staffed there. And then another part of reading the mayor's transition report, we were asked to strengthen some of the administrative processes throughout the department. So what we're going to do is we're going to add almost 50 officers to our records management system, or we're going to add, 50 civilian personnel to our records management unit to make sure that we're putting officers back on the beat. And we're also going to add 30 civilian personnel to better support our Bureau of Internal Affairs to ensure that they're creating timely and efficient investigations that are following the policy. In crafting this entire document, what we look back on was the CCPSA annual report. One of the big things that we saw on page 2 of this report was CCPSA asking for a stronger response to violence. What we're doing to address that is the 100 detectives that I spoke about, the 30 evidence technicians, 100 sergeants, 20 lieutenants, 10 captains to ensure the supervision, along with the 15 community organizers to better build connections. Pages 6, 7, and 9 ask for a lot more reporting. So we've added information coordinators, which is a civilian title code, throughout the department to better engage in that storytelling with the public. And we're expanding our data and analytics unit by 10 civilians as well. And on page 10, there were a lot of concerns about legal judgments. We're adding 16 attorneys, which will expand our attorneys from 3 to 9 attorneys. So we'll be much better positioned to deal with some of these legal judgments. And we will have a total of 39 part-time tactical review analysts to review uses of force who will be civilians. So that's a summary of our budget, and I'm more than happy to take any of your questions.
Thank you for that presentation. Board member, for any commissioners who have questions about the CPD budget.
Ryan, at the beginning, you said this is gonna be a transformational budget. What do you mean by the word transformational?
So if you look at what we've done in the past, we haven't done major changes, right? This budget is going to add 440 promotional opportunities for foreign officers. But in addition to that, we're going to add 398 new civilian positions. If you think in the context of what we have 800 civilians. So we're almost increasing the number of civilians by 50%. We're trying to move as quickly as expeditiously as possible to satisfy the consent decree, which we think will be a transformational experience. By going through the consent decree, that will transform the Chicago Police Department and deliver a better department for the people of Chicago.
Is there or will there be a strategic plan tied to this budget?
So we're working on a strategic plan. We're looking at the information CCPSA has provided us in the past, and we're going to continue to work on that strategic plan.
When can we expect that?
That will be a superintendent Snell question. So we'll continue to work expeditiously, but we're working on it.
Okay, we're waiting for it, so that's great. What are the plans in this budget to reduce overtime?
So one of the things that this budget will do directly with overtime is by taking more officers out of potentially the training academy, right? By putting 100 civilian training officers into that training academy. That's when we will allow us to bring some of those full duty sworn officers go back to the street, which will then allow us to have more officers to do all the work that we know that needs to be done. We'll be doing less overtime, more regular tour duty. In addition to this, by adding 100 sergeants who are providing supervision out there in the field, you're going to be able to get more out of the officers that are there by providing stronger supervision. In addition to that, we're building out our inspection division, which is composed primarily of captains, who are going to be able to make sure that people are complying with the policies of the department at all levels, all the time. So I think we're going to have about 6 captains there who will just be roaming, making sure people are doing what they need to do, being efficient, not sitting down on jobs, and making sure that they're doing what they need to do.
Okay. When you say civilians, how many of the civilians that you're planning on hiring are actually retired officers who you're going to bring back?
So I mean, we'll have to see who applies. I know that for our track unit, that we're only looking for people with law enforcement experience. I'm not saying that all of those are going to be, those won't all be retired officers, but what we need to make sure with that unit is that they have some credibility with the officer. That when they go to the officer and they say that use of force was not correct, it's someone who's been in their shoes and that they can relate to it. So we're trying to make sure that unit is primarily law enforcement. As far as the training officers, I know LAPD, they bring in professional actors to come and be part of that cohort, the role players. So we would be more than happy to explore something like that. I know we put together a ton of e-learnings, which calls for videographers to make sure that we're delivering that in a videographer way. In addition, we have a curriculum, which you don't necessarily need to be a sworn officer. So it's all going to depend on what the needs are. I will say for a lot of our data roles, we tend to see a lot more people coming out of master's degree programs. And then as far as our advocates, that tends to be a lot more people who are coming out of kind of the social service sector who want to be on that front line engaging with victims to make sure that as they're going through the hardest days of their lives, they're getting all the support that they need.
The way that I heard you talking about some of the civilian positions, it sounded like some of the civilian positions you're hiring for are going to be the ones that are building community relationships. So wondering how we're trying to increase trust between officers and community, how that's going to happen if civilians are the ones doing the building of the trust.
Yeah, so if you look in the district, a lot of the people who are working in the tax offices, those are sworn officers. They're gonna be the ones there day in, day out. A lot of what you're seeing here kind of in our community policing section, it's gonna be more kind of administrative staff setting it up, and then the officers can really have those interactions that are most meaningful. We don't need an officer to manage schedules and send out invites and do all those kind of behind the scenes things that make it engaging and meaningful. I mean, looking at all the work that you all have to do to make this meeting happen, it wouldn't be a good use of your time to set up this engagement. We're hoping to use those civilians to kind of set the stage for those meaningful engagements.
Okay, and this will be, I have two more questions. How are you using the term budget neutral when you're getting an increase of $90 million to your budget?
So if you look at what the budget is, of that 90 million, that's not just the corporate fund, that's the entire fund. 50 million of that is going to be going to defray the cost of the DNC. And then if you look at, I believe it's somewhere between 30 and 40 million to meet statutory, contract increases. So Chicago Police Department headcount isn't increasing whatsoever. And in fact, if we had just done nothing, the contract would have increased much more than what you're seeing as index.
Okay,
This is a good deal for the taxpayer.
yeah, great. And then the last thing I want to comment on is, it sounds like your plan for DEI is a great one. I think it's encouraging, so I want to commend the department for establishing that. It seems like 4 staff people for 11,000 employees they're gonna have a lot to do. So are there plans to increase that at some point?
So, as I'm sure you all have seen with hiring in the city, you gotta start with a good core group, and you gotta kind of get that nucleus going, and then roll from there. We already have a racial equity action plan in place, and we just need to kind of start small and then build larger. I think this would be the largest DEI team outside of City Hall. I know the fire department has 1 senior equity officer, but this will be for the city, this is a large DEI team in the department.
Any other commissioners with questions? Comments?
Hi, thank you for the presentation, that was super helpful. I just have a couple questions. You have noted that there's going to be, I think, 290 sworn promotional opportunities, right?
So I believe that was just within supervision and training. So when we're saying 290 sworn promotional opportunities, what we're talking about there is 170 field training officers.
Okay.
So when you come out of the academy, you need someone to be one-on-one with you to make sure that you're running your job. So that's 170 right there.
Okay.
Then we're adding 100 sergeants to make sure we're getting closer to unity of command, unity of command, span and control.
Right.
And then we're adding 20 lieutenants on top of that, because if you're adding those sergeants, you need someone also on top of them to provide additional supervision. That's how we get to 290.
So can you let me know with those promotional opportunities, which sound excellent, what kind of leadership training is CPD going to provide to make sure that those individuals who are getting those promotions are adequately prepared to take on the responsibilities that are going to be asked to now do? And I noticed, that there is room in the budget for training, but could you describe what type of leadership training is contemplated by this budget and whether or not you guys have, any kind of strategic plan to, so to speak, build your branch?
Yeah, so I'm gonna turn this over to Commander Van in a second, but what I will say this budget has, is it has money in it to provide more training for, the exempt staff to go and travel and get more command training, because we have a very young command staff. As far as the sergeants, I'll turn that over to Commander Van, to kind of speak to what sort of training is provided there.
So, thank you for your question, Yvette. As far as the leadership training as a whole, that's gonna be something that Deputy Chief Papiano College will be exploring. What I can say logistically speaking, it has to evolve to where we're moving as an organization. There's obviously traditional leadership, or the ability to make decisions, to stand behind decisions. But, there's gonna be some technology that's going to start hopefully rolling out in 2024, that future leaders are going to need to be trained on. And then as we're developing internal programs that can move us forward in the consent decree, that also has to be part of the training. So everything has to work backwards from that sergeant training forward, but I can't personally speak to what specific programs would be included in that.
And then my next question is, it just wants some clarification on some of the terms that you use. So you talk about strengthening administrative processes, and then, there's the language in there about strengthening on data related operations. So I'm gonna tell you why I'm asking the question, and then that will help you answer it. I think we hear consistently, and certainly from my experience as a prosecutor in Cook County, that CPD data systems are frustrating to say the least. And there is data housed in all different systems in all different places. It's not cohesive, it's hard to find, blah, blah, blah. In addition to that, your equipment is a bit small. So it's difficult for police officers to appropriately type their reports and generate all of the things that they need to generate, because the systems just don't seem to have the bandwidth to support the paperwork needs, right? So given that whole mass, if you will, can you describe to me what these funds, first of all, or any funds coming out of either of the pots that I identified to address some of those systematic issues that you have in terms of equipment, computers, all of that. And then, so that's number one. And then number two, can you explain if there is going to be funds available to try to make that whole data report keeping system more cohesive, and and to put CPD in a position where they can be confident that they are meeting all of their constitutional requirements and turning over the appropriate evidence for their investigation. Because I think that that's a real issue given the current state of those record keeping systems.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, record keeping systems, that was one of the buzzwords of the budget hearings. It was the ERP system, which is citywide, and then also at CPD, we have the RMS system. CPD works with PSA to get the RMS system. One of the big things that we're trying to work through with this is procurement. So we need to make sure that as we're getting this new record keeping system, we're procuring it in a way that is consistent with City of Chicago rules. I will say, as far as the hardware, this has been a big year for us. We've had over 5,000 new computers installed across the department. And we are going to roll out a DEX system, which is going to help us have a more mobile platform, which will help with the accuracy there. And maybe, Commander Van, if you want to talk about the DEX system.
So the deck system is the phone that I have, that it syncs right into the vehicle. You can do just about everything to what, I know, Director Dan Casey spoke at the budget hearing about the different technology systems, to your point, right, to string everything together so that I don't have to go copy out arrest reports, put it into an inventory report, put it into an ISR, whatever the flow is. They're working on that back end to kind of work through to increase the efficiency. What will also be worked up. I mean, this is great technology, and I came on 1991, so this didn't exist, but the ability to see who's around on foot with these is going to improve greatly. You know, and that goes to efficiency. Everything that you're talking about is about increasing efficiency of either within the station doing a report, processing an arrest. These are the types of tools that we'll be able to use in the field to work through the learning process of the pre-trial fairness act. You know, to produce these people on scene. These will also be the tools that we can utilize newer technology to, you know, I was downtown during Mexican Independence Day. That's, you know, the celebration full weekend. If the officers have things like this, you can see eye in the sky where everyone's at and move things accordingly, which I think will help us with the responses that we do have out in the field. So there's always something coming out. You know, it's just you're constantly trying to play catch up. I know that OPSA, OEMC, along with the working through the CAD system, that should increase our efficiency and supervision. You know, it's a lot of people demand when you're out there in the squad. Some of that is you can do it through this, but we haven't had an updated CAD system in 30 years, I think. You know, so we're at the point. I agree with you. We're in some spots, you know, in the department we're running with, you know, IBM 286, you know, that maybe bought in college, but we're getting there. It's just a slow process.
Okay, here's my next question. When I look at the budget, like the big budget, it's not the easiest thing in the world to read. So, could you guys just give me a little bit of an overview of some of the budgetary considerations that are going to be working towards increased officer bonus overall, and I'm not just talking about commissions, I'm talking about, you know, various different aspects of over officer wellness, including improvement of facilities, including access to more mental health care, including less days off canceled, less multiple days in a row where you're working, you know, 14 days in a row, etc. How is the budget addressing those wellness concerns?
Yeah, absolutely. So this year, which is a big year for us, where we've opened 2 new employee assistance program centers. So we have one on the northwest side, we have one on the southwest side, and then we have our existing center over in this area. We have a total of 3 wellness centers, which are all here in the city of Chicago. In addition to this, we've rolled out a new app, a Portico app, which is best in practice right now for law enforcement. So each and every officer has access to that app. Beyond that, though, we are trying to improve the situation within the district. A lot of them are old and they are in need of capital improvement. We're encouraged that we're seeing AIS split into fleet and facilities management and Department of Technology and Innovation, which will allow them to focus more on our facilities and fleet. And we're also we're very one of the biggest things that we need to figure out is what the conditions are going to be like in the lot for our officers, but also the people that are living in those lots.
Sorry, Dr. Ryan, you have enough for the record that President Barker is no longer present, so I'm going to give you. Okay, for the record, sorry.
Yep. So as you see all of those things change, it will help with officer wellness. And then as far as the overtime, tier deployment has already ended, which is the end of days off cancel for a lot of officers.
And on to that point, there is we do work through anticipatory notice, effective notice, when we're going to cancel days off. And, that, I don't want to speak out of turn, but I think that is part of what is being negotiated or been agreed upon with the FOP, but it's definitely a practice that I know Superintendent Snow makes that. We are going to ensure it's done within the guidelines that we currently have, as well as advance notice of when we have to switch the gears. You know, it's not gonna be random, it's gonna be strategic, it's going to be planned, it's going to be given enough notice so that those officers can make their various, maneuvers and down the line.
I'm gonna hand this to Ronald before I do, I just want to say thank you to both of you for being here to help explain this and showing what you're going to language for us. This is a much more positive and I think, more educational and more, just beneficial experience for the commission and the community, and I think CBD as well, given this type of collaboration, so we do appreciate that. Thank you both, for this presentation. So I just have a quick few questions. So one of the first ones is sort of a piggyback of what, Commissioner Lloyd has pointed out. I thought this presentation was heavy on like the workforce pieces and the hiring and things of that nature. But I'm interested to know sort of what is the plan to implement your appropriate data management tools? And this goes along with training, with reporting, with evaluations and all of those things. Like, what are these performance management strategies that you have, just to, because you mentioned data analysis, but in order to do the data analysis, you have to have the proper mechanisms in place to capture the data so that you have the information that you actually want to analyze and report out on. So if you could share a bit about how this budget is going to address that.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of our data systems are all going to be done through PSA, and those are going to be the sort of systems that we were just discussing with the PSA is the Office of Public Safety Administration. So essentially what they do is they do a lot of our technology. So a lot of the cameras, they do our computer-aided dispatch. So if you call 911, that then goes to the call taker, and then the call taker needs to make sure it gets to the officer. They make sure all those systems work. And then they also manage our records management system. So they're working to try and get us a new RMS record management system. And what they've done is gotten us this DEX system, which is the phone that Commander Van was talking about. So what this will make sure is we have kind of the hardware in place out in the field where the officers can put in a lot of information, and then the RMS will help store it in a structured way that then we need to recall it. Our data analysis team can do that. To your point about performance management, as we seek our the Office of Constitutional Policing and Reform, they're standing up a performance management unit to take a look at some of these consent decree metrics to make sure we are making the progress we need. Of course, the data is messy, but we can't stand still and wait for perfect. We're working to try and figure out what we have and then make it better in the service of the consent decree.
Thank you. Just also a question of clarity, because some of my officers are this. When you spoke about those facilities, were you speaking to like the clinician facilities, or were you speaking to the actual police districts? Because that's what my question is from that perspective. Like, what within this budget is going to address the concerns that have been outlined by officers about their physical locations where they have to report every day, and then are there dollars allocated to addressing infrastructure issues of the police districts across the city?
Yeah, so the structure of the budget is the facilities do not live within the police department budget, nor do they live in the fire department budget. All facility money is basically under the Asset and Information Services Department. That department is splitting next year into the Department of Technology and Innovation and Fleet and Facilities Management. So their budget is much more capital intensive, which means that they use a lot of bonds, they use different financial instruments than what you see in this budget. A lot of what's in this budget is more so taxpayer funded and grants, which is coming from the corporate, we call it the corporate budget. But the facilities are coming from the capital budget, which CPD does not have access to. What we are hoping for in 2024 is a renewed conversation with the renewed 2FM about what steps we can do to take some of that money to improve the facilities that our officers have to experience each and every day. Leading facilities management, and they will be they're currently part of AIS, and they're gonna split next year. AIS will split into leading facilities management and the Department of Technology and Innovation.
Thank you. And one other question I had, you were speaking about, I had it under the strength and administrative process about the 50 additional civilians that will be added to that. Do you have an idea of what your current percentage of officers that are doing a lot of these civilian roles and what it will look like after this implementation, and also how many officers will still be doing roles that could, potentially be done by civilians that you haven't necessarily figured out how to, move them out of those roles and allocate civilians into those positions?
Yeah, with respect to the record management, the records division, I'm not, off the top of my head, I don't know what percentage of that is sworn. What I will say though is that while we don't want to see strong concentration of sworn across the entire department, we want to make sure that there is some sworn presence. So for example, in our conversations with the independent monitoring team, they found that there were some errors with our field pursuit dashboard. And part of that was we needed that sworn perspective on what we were putting together to make sure that the civilian analysts who were coming in understood exactly what they were looking at and making sure that that analysis was correct. So there is a lot of benefit to having some sworn in the mix there. In addition to that, you're always going to have the officers who get injured on duty in service of the city of Chicago, and we need to make sure that we have roles for them to do while they recover. So you will see some people come in, sometimes they help with 911 calls or police reports, or I think not 911 calls, but police reports is going to be helped with. And if we can find other roles for them to keep them useful as they recover, we will do that as much as possible.
Just a quick round of the commissioners swearing about 3:45, 7:45. We can continue questions and then quick draw that question. You might follow the practice.
Am I good to go? Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. First of all, piggybacking a bit off Commissioner Terry's last question, I assume that in advancing towards the civilianization goal, you may have conducted some kind of strategic review to see how many positions or which positions that qualify for this. Do you have kind of a long-term view as to what the eventual goal might be if you were, given whatever budget you wanted to go as far as you could?
I mean, I think the big thing here is we have to see what hiring, we'll see what hiring. Like, it's great to have a vision of where we want to go, but in large part, this is the easy part. The hard part is executing on these projects.
Gotcha. Next, it seems that, a really big marquee part of this budget is the hiring of several hundred new training officers that you mentioned, both foreign and civilian. This is kind of a two-part question. The first part is I understand that a lot of their work will be bringing the department into much higher secondary compliance. You mentioned we're at 80% preliminary compliance, and much 6% operational compliance. Do you have a goal for how much secondary compliance you're hoping to reach with the infusion of all these new training officers?
I mean, that's a superintendent question. I mean, we're going to try and go as fast as possible while maintaining fidelity with the training.
Understood. Thank you. And do you have any kind of particular sort of categories that you're hoping to slot in these new officers to, or will they be across all of training? Or tell us a bit more about how training will transform.
Yeah, so we have right now we have two academies. We have one on Jackson and we have one on the west side. All of our recruits need to go through the academy, and under the consent decree, we deliver 40 hours of research training to all of our existing officers. So this is a much larger lift for our training academy than we've had historically. So this will help us not only help with the recruits, so we're hoping to add about 75 recruits in each class next year. But we also need to make sure that we're continuing the in-service education for our current officers. So it's going to help us meet those two items for the civilian training officers. And then with respect to the field training officers, when we crunch the numbers with that team, if we get back to hiring between 70 and 100 probationary police officers every month, we're going to need approximately 450 field training officers to meet that need by the time we factor in injured on duty, we factor in furloughs and sick days and all those other things, and their own training. It's going to take some of them out of the rotation.
Gotcha. And then one last follow-up on training. Do you think this could result in other potential benefits such as smaller class sizes, flexibility on when classes are held? Something that we've heard before. Each of course working group report mentioned that often officers will have to work the night shift and then the next day be reported to an early morning training, which is definitely not optimal for officers or trainers. Do you think any of those other benefits might come about?
I guess that answer comes as to Ryan's point on the hiring side of things. If watches can get expanded out in some way, then that would be a benefit for those first watch officers, being able to train during a normal stretch for them. I think that would come down to once again, Deputy Chief Pop on his seat, as we can bring on some of those civilian hires.
Gotcha. And then lastly, another part of this budget that I find very important is the addition of more domestic violence advocates. I believe it's about 5x from 5 to 27, and crime victims advocates up 7 times from 3 to 22. For any Chicagoans who are watching, can you just kind of speak to the kinds of services that these advocates will be able to expand as we're hiring so many more of them?
Yeah, absolutely. So with respect to the domestic violence advocates, a lot of what they're going to do is help with some of the case management. They're going to help with adding a warm handoff between victims who may come into the Chicago Police Department and social service agencies that will be able to provide additional care. This will also allow us to expand to 2 shifts, so we'll be able to work a morning shift and then also an evening shift, which will run from 12 to 8. And then we're also seeking to expand on the weekends as well, as we expand hiring. Also, so that's with the domestic violence advocates. With the crime victim advocates, we're hoping to expand beyond just victims of non-fatal shootings to all violent crime. And also provide a little bit more specialization, right? So the 15th district on the far northwest side, you might not see as many shooting incidents, but that might allow us to focus on something else like elder crime or crimes against children. And it'll provide more specialization for more effective crimes and more support across the city.
Yeah, thank you so much.
For the record, the last record, I have a question for Commissioner Carcosa, and you have that in this Commissioner Terry, in the absence of Commissioner President Driver, myself, Vice President Women, is going to be, sorry, this is my second time running, so I think thank you both for being here. I'm going to ask 2 more questions. We made a big deal last time about workforce allocation and resources that were being deployed across the many districts. Can you tell me a little bit more about what the department needs to make sure that they understand how the workforce is being allocated, and are those needs being reflected in the budget?
So the workforce allocation project is something that's still being discussed at superintendent level. I know that he is very in tune with what the need, not just currently is, but what the projected need will be. I can't speak to, the budget in and of itself, as we've discussed, it's moving the needle in spots that should have the correct impact to move us forward. With the consent, with efficiency, with maximizing the number of officers we can put out onto the street, to answer policy. So I think this budget addresses that first step, but everything is really a year-to-year experiment. To see what, to what Ryan had said, right? We can have all these different positions. I can't tell you how many are gonna come through, you guys now that looks some higher as well, so it can sometimes be a challenge.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know about that. So I want to talk a little bit about the salaries, and I believe you said there were 17 positions that are currently being added to help deal with the issue of the legal judgment for being paid out. Is that right?
So we're adding 15 senior attorneys to the title code, and then we're adding one assistant director within records to help us better address the key matter.
Those are all being added within the police department.
Yes.
One thing that I think I find encouraging is that you are putting more allocation for the data complexity, the fixing of the data problems, and some of the data infrastructure that you mentioned. But one of the big concerns that I have about the way data interacts with legal settlements is that we heard from the Inspector General in 2018 that a big deficiency in the way that we look at the risk management because of the records that came to the Department of Law, and how their legal cases was very inadequate at dealing with some of the recurring trends of police wrongdoing. Have you had any conversations with the Department of Law about that? And have you had any sense of how in your position that you'll work to fix that sort of problem that in my mind, that could be mostly exists in the Department of Law, department that you don't get to come to the budget for?
Yeah, so that question is similar to one that we were asked during council, and our acting general counsel responded that we've got QA to provide us a better records management for our cases. One of the nice things about QA is it's an off-the-shelf product, so we don't need to try and build anything, which is something that you can buy like Microsoft Office and it works. And then once you have a system, you need people to work with the system and with the Department of Law. So at least 5 of those attorneys are going to be directly within the Office of Legal Affairs, and they'll work at the direction of our general counsel to help defend the city and the Department from any sort of legal risks.
Those are all the questions that I have. I know we could probably keep asking questions in way all night long. I want to thank both of you for taking the time to do this. I think the other commission felt that this reflects, at least on my end, it's a good faith from the department that you're going to come here and ask questions. For the public, our report is still being drafted. We're still evaluating what the budget priorities and recommendations will be. I think you heard a little bit about the questions that we have here, but there are other issues too that we're exploring. Thank you all for being here. You can stay here, but if you're more comfortable going back to that, thank you. Great. Okay. So with no further questions, I think we're going to move on to the miscellaneous part of the agenda. Are there any items of miscellaneous business that commissioners would like to bring forward? Seeing none, we're gonna move to a simple new meeting. To connect with the commission via social media, you can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Chicago CCPSA, or you can search the Community Commission for Public Safety and Accountability. We also have Instagram, Twitter, both with the same handle at CCPSA_Chicago, and a YouTube channel where you can watch our meetings at Chicago CCPSA. Now, I'm going to announce that the commission's next regular meeting will be held on Thursday, November 13th. Sorry, Monday, November 13th, at 6:30 p.m. The location is still yet to be determined. Okay. Sorry, the location will be tentative. Seeing no further business, we are now going to be moving forward. We hope to see you on November 13th, and we hope to stay engaged, and we encourage people to join us in the work that we are doing. With no further business before the commission, this meeting is now over. Thank you.